If you've had any cryptid encounters that you'd like shared on here, email me at jttosstories@gmail.com. Story 1. This is my first time going public about this encounter, out of fear of seeing it again. This took place roughly 14 years ago. When I was a kid, my family moved out of the city and moved to a small town called Deerbrook, situated on the outskirts of Antigua, Wisconsin. Our house was surrounded by woods on 3 sides and a river and field in the back. The first year out there was really calm and relaxing, other than constant coyote howls every night, but every so often there'd be a different howl. It was a much deeper, much louder howl that would shake us to our core. At first, my parents would dismiss it as a wolf or just a bigger coyote, but something about it seemed off. One night, in mid-July, my brother, my sister, and I decided to pitch a tent in the back field along the tree line. We just really wanted to go camping. We sat with sticks roasting our marshmallows till it got really dark. Then the howls started up. Once again, that deep howl was back, and it sounded like it was right in our ears. With how loud it was, it's hard to even guess where it was coming from, so we decided to put our fire out and just get in the tent. Later that night, my sister fell asleep, so my brother and I chatted and made jokes. Within minutes, we heard animals running around outside the tent, and then this little raccoon started to claw at the side of the tent that I was sleeping on, and at first I just kept poking at it, but then we heard something else, the crack of sticks from the trees. At that point, my brother thought it was a bear and told us to be quiet and woke my sister up. We started to hear footsteps coming closer and closer and closer. Pretty quickly, they were right next to me. The raccoon just bolted out of there. And then this strange odor started coming from somewhere. It smelled like copper, sulfur, and wet dog. It was almost overpowering and made me want to puke. Then we hear our mom calling us, and as she shined the flashlight on us, it revealed the most unsettling thing I've ever seen. The shadow of this thing was shining through our tent, and it was massive. It had pointed ears that were tilted back like a dog on the prowl, and its hands were human-looking with long fingers that ended in a point. The mouth was in the shape of a snout, just a little shorter, and it had a mid-sized tail. My mom started screaming. Whatever that thing was bolted back into the woods. We rushed inside with our mom and didn't go back out for a few days. Fast forward a few months. I was in the living room with my mom while her sister was in the shower. We were watching Wheel of Fortune or something like that, and my sister screamed bloody murder. My mom jumped up and went to get her. She pulled her out of the bathroom, and I got curious as to why she was freaking out, so I went in to see. Above the shower is one of those super small windows that only a small head could fit through, and in the window was a set of red, glowing eyes staring down at me. We stared at each other for what felt like a decade. I didn't feel fear, more just curiosity. And I didn't feel like I was in danger at that time, as my mom came in to then pull me out of the eyes, turning away as well. The rest of the night was quiet after that. A few days later, my brother came back from his dad's. He and I had bunk beds, so I'd always take the bottom bunk. That night was kind of gloomy. It wasn't real windy, but it was drizzling a little bit. Later in the night, my brother and I got woken up to the window being opened. It was locked beforehand. After that, we closed and went back to bed. It happened again and again, like 3 more times. Each time we locked it, but the final time was the worst. Flung open so hard that the glass shattered, and then we saw what pushed it open. The same hand from the tent, but I can see it clearly now. It had matted black fur, or hair rather, covering its whole arms. The skin on its palm was like a light tan, and the claws were about 5 to 6 inches long. And on the bottom of the window, I saw its face, or at least what it was showing. It was just the eyes, glowing bright red. They looked like the embers of a roaring fire. My brother and I bolted up, grabbed my sister, and locked ourselves in the back gaming room. We stayed there for the rest of the night. When my mom came home, we told her and packed our things. We moved out of that house in a day and took what we could fit, filling 1 car and a U-Haul. My stepdad's truck was full as well, and we left, never to return. To this day, my family is scared to talk about it, but if my brother and I have a few, we discuss it. but my mom just shuts it down whenever it's brought up. Thank you for your time. Story 2. So for a little background on me that day, I work in real estate, more explicitly commercial real estate. So my work takes me all over the place, from urban industrial areas to very off the beaten path secluded areas, farmland, development lands, etc. On this day in particular, in October of 2012, my last assignment of the day was to go out and survey an old farmstead near Cayuga in Haldimand County, about 30 miles south of Hamilton, Ontario. The place had been vacant since the 90s. I arrived in the late afternoon, I'd say around 5:30ish. The place was the last one on a dead-end country road and couldn't be seen from the road. I went up the long driveway and proceeded to do my look over the place. There were 3 structures: the house, a garage, and a large tool shed. I walked around the front of the house, which was completely boarded up with no means of seeing inside. I proceeded down the far side towards the other buildings. The shed was basically falling completely down, but the garage was mostly still up. I noticed around the side man door a lot of huge scratches, and the door was half broken down, but still held shut by a padlock on one side and the middle and upper hinge. The bottom part was forced inward, and the door and clapboards around it were covered with these scratches. But not scratches like a dog would leave. These scratches were huge and parallel, but spread apart almost like fingernail scratches. They were very deep, obviously, but with a lot of pressure. That's when I looked down and saw huge paw prints, but not regular round prints, almost elongated a little bit. The area around this partially broken down door was covered with these paw prints. If I had to venture a guess at how wide they were, I would say at least 5 inches. I was wearing heeled dress boots, and when I put my foot over the paw print, I could see the print on either side of my foot, and I wear a size 10, so I don't have tiny feet by any means. I began to get uneasy, and that's when I noticed that all the sounds of the forest were gone. It was dead silent. That's when I noticed the stench, like wet dog urine and feces. I mean, the whole area just smelled rotten, like a swamp, rotten decay. This smell was strong and very putrid. I got very uneasy. Like all of a sudden, I knew I wasn't alone, and decided I'd seen enough and quickly headed back to my car. That's when I heard something in the bushes, and it sounded big. It was going through the trees very quickly and hard. I got back to my car, I got in, and locked the doors. When I started my car and turned on the lights, that's when I caught eyeshine in the trees ahead of me. But the eyeshine was not at the level a dog's head would be at. It was a lot higher, I'd say 4 to 5 feet up, maybe even a bit more. Couldn't make out its shape as it was getting on towards dusk, and there were a lot of shadows on the tree, but I thought I could see a large figure in the tree line, but I couldn't be sure. I started to freak out a little bit, and I decided it was time to go. So I backed around into a wet marshy spot and kind of got my car stuck. I was more interested in watching this thing than watching where I was going, so that was a mistake. My attention quickly went back to the car as I tried to free myself from the mud. When I looked back to where this thing was, it's gone. The spot it was in, I could see further into the trees, so there was definitely something there, but I couldn't exactly see a shape, more just a large, shadowy figure. After several seconds of rocking my car back and forth, I managed to get out, and I left very quickly. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life. Like I said, I did not clearly see what it was, but it had an intense feeling of evil. Something bad was there. I returned to that spot about a year and a half after the accident, and the place is gone. Someone bought the property and tore it down and cut down a lot of trees, but to the best of my knowledge, nothing's ever been developed there. It's still just vacant land. I've not really told anyone as of this, because I don't want to be ridiculed or made fun of. Coworkers said it was probably just a bear that I saw, but I know for a fact that there are no bears this far south in Ontario unless it's a zoo. I had long forgotten about this until I recently saw a video on YouTube about someone's encounter with something very similar to what I described. I handled the sale of some farmland on the nearby to the place I experienced this, Six Nations Native Reservation, and the client was one of the few remaining pure-blood natives. I put him easily in his 80s, if not older. I asked him about odd happenings in the area, like strange animals, and sort of told him about my experience. Not in detail, just that I was on that property. He responded with a question. You saw it, didn't you? He went on to say that there are many things that are unknown to this world, but wouldn't comment any further about my experiences. Only said that there's a good reason that particular place has sat empty and unused for decades. I had the odd nightmare of that day for about a year afterwards, and I'm still very hesitant to do surveys in areas like that.